Clara had always been a woman of routine. Every Sunday morning without fail, she would wake up early, dress in her simple cotton sari, and make her way to the cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet place, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets only nature understood. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and fresh flowers left by other visitors who came to pay their respects. For Clara, these visits were sacred, a time when she could be alone with her thoughts, close to Daniel, the man she had loved more than life itself. Daniel had died 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving behind a void so deep it felt like nothing could ever fill it. He had been her everything, her partner, her confidant, her best friend. They had shared 17 beautiful years together before fate cruelly snatched him away. In the days after his passing, Clara had struggled to find meaning in anything. Life seemed hollow without him, every moment heavy with an ache she couldn't escape. But over time, visiting his grave became her anchor. It gave her something to hold on to, a reason to keep moving forward even when the weight of her grief threatened to pull her under. The cemetery wasn't just a place of mourning for Clara, it was also a place of peace. She found comfort in tending to Daniel's resting place, making sure it was clean and tidy, just as he would have liked. Each week she brought a small bucket filled with water, a soft cloth, and a pair of gardening gloves. She'd carefully wipe away any dirt or dust from the marble headstone, polish it until it gleamed, and clear out weeds or stray leaves that had gathered around the base. Sometimes she brought fresh flowers, jasmine his favorite, and arranged them neatly in a vase beside the stone. As she worked, she talked to him softly, sharing snippets of her week, telling him about the people she'd met, the little joys and frustrations of daily life. It was almost as if he were still there, listening quietly as he always had. On this particular Sunday, however, something felt different. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the rows of graves. A cool breeze rustled through, the trees carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Clara knelt down beside Daniel's grave, placing her bucket beside her. She reached for the cloth and began wiping the smooth surface of the headstone, humming a tune Daniel used to love. But as she leaned closer to inspect a stubborn patch of moss near the base, her hand brushed against something unusual in the soil. At first, she thought it was just a rock or perhaps a root jutting out from beneath the ground. But when she looked closer, she realized it was neither. There was a small indentation, an odd circular hole that seemed unnatural amidst the otherwise undisturbed earth. Curiosity flickered in Clara's chest. What was this? She hadn't noticed it during her previous visits, and it certainly didn't look like something that belonged here. Frowning slightly, she set the cloth aside and used her fingers to scrape away some of the loose dirt around the edges of the hole. To her surprise, the more she dug, the wider the opening became. Beneath the surface, she could see what appeared to be wooden planks, old and weathered but unmistakably man-made. Her heart began to race. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone had buried something here right next to Daniel's grave. For a moment, Clara hesitated. Should she stop? Was this something she should report to the caretaker of the cemetery? But then again, what harm could come from taking a closer look? After all, this was Daniel's final resting place, and whatever lay hidden beneath the ground might somehow be connected to him. With trembling hands, she continued to dig, widening the hole bit by bit. The wooden planks creaked softly as they were exposed to the light of day for the first time in who knows how long. Finally, she uncovered a narrow gap large enough for her to peer inside. As she leaned closer, squinting into the darkness, her breath caught in her throat. There, nestled within the shallow cavity, was a small metal box. Rust streaked its surface, evidence of years spent buried underground, yet it remained intact. Clara's pulse quickened. Who had put it here? And why? More importantly, what was inside? Carefully, she reached in and pulled the box free, cradling it in her lap. It was heavier than she expected, its corners sharp despite the corrosion. Turning it over in her hands, she noticed that it was locked. though the latch seemed fragile, as if it might give way with a little effort. But Clara didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she sat there for a long while, staring at the mysterious object, her mind swirling with questions. Who had gone to such lengths to hide it? Why bury it so close to Daniel's grave? And most unsettling of all, why now? Why had she discovered it today after all this time? The answers eluded her, but one thing was certain. This box held secrets, secrets that might change everything she thought she knew about Daniel and herself. With a deep breath, Clara slipped the box into her bag, resolving to take it home and examine it further. Whatever lay inside, she was determined to uncover the truth. Little did she know, this discovery would lead her down a path far more complex and extraordinary than she could have ever imagined. Clara's heart pounded as she hurried home, clutching the mysterious metal box tightly in her bag. The weight of it seemed to grow heavier with every step, not just physically, but emotionally. Her mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Who had buried it? Why was it placed so close to Daniel's grave? And what could possibly be inside that someone had gone to such great lengths to hide? The closer she got to her house, the more her curiosity mingled with a growing sense of unease. Once inside, Clara locked the door behind her and placed the box on the kitchen table. She stared at it for a long moment, hesitating. This wasn't just any ordinary discovery. It felt like stepping into uncharted territory, a place where answers might come at a cost she wasn't ready to pay. But there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, she retrieved a small hammer from the drawer and gently tapped at the rusted latch. It gave way after a few tries, creaking open with a sound that echoed through the quiet room. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of items carefully arranged: faded photographs, sealed envelopes, and a single key attached to a small tag. The photographs caught her attention first. They were old, yellowed with age, and showed Daniel standing with people she didn't recognize. In some, he wore clothes she had never seen before, jeans and jackets that looked rugged, nothing like the neat shirts and trousers he usually favored. His expression in these pictures was different too, harder somehow, as if he were trying to appear tougher or more serious than the gentle man she knew. Clara's hands trembled as she picked up one of the photos. Was this really Daniel? Or was it someone who just looked like him? Her gaze shifted to the envelopes next. There were half a dozen of them, all sealed shut, their edges frayed with time. Each bore a handwritten label on the front, though none mentioned her name. Instead, they were addressed to places or phrases she didn't understand. Safe House 3, Emergency Protocol, Final Instructions. The handwriting was unmistakably Daniel's, yet it felt foreign, almost clinical compared to the warm, looping script she remembered from his love notes and birthday cards. Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. These weren't personal letters, meant for her. They were something else entirely, part of a world she hadn't known existed. Then there was the key. It was simple, unremarkable even, save for the tag attached to it. On the tag, written in bold black marker, were the words, Storage Unit 147. Clara turned it over in her fingers, examining it closely. What did it unlock? Where was this storage unit located? And why had Daniel left it here, hidden beneath the ground near his grave? The questions piled up faster than she could process them, each one pulling her deeper into a web of uncertainty. She spent hours going through the contents of the box, laying everything out on the table like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. The photographs revealed glimpses of a life she couldn't reconcile with the Daniel she knew. In one image, he stood beside a sleek black car, his arm resting casually on the roof. Behind him loomed a building with darkened windows, its sign, barely visible but hinting at some kind of business venture. Another photo showed him seated at a table with two other men, their faces grim, their postures tense. A map lay spread out between them, marked with red circles and arrows. Clara frowned. What kind of meeting was this? And why did it look so secretive? The envelopes proved equally cryptic. Though tempted to open them immediately, Clara resisted. knowing that whatever was inside might only raise more questions or worse, put her in danger. Instead, she focused on the key, tracing her finger along its grooves. Storage unit number 147. Something about those numbers nagged at her, as if they held the key, not just literally but metaphorically, to unlocking the mystery surrounding Daniel's life. She decided to act, to follow the trail wherever it led, even if it meant confronting truths she wasn't prepared for. The next morning, Clara set out to find the storage facility. Armed with the address printed faintly on the tag, she drove across town, her nerves taut like guitar strings. The journey took her to an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, where rows of nondescript warehouses lined the streets. At the end of a narrow lane, she found what she was looking for, a modest storage complex surrounded by high fences topped with barbed wire. The sign above the gate read, "Secure Store Units," and below it, the numbers 147 stood out prominently on a faded directory board. Clara parked her car and approached the office cautiously. Inside, a bored-looking attendant glanced up from his magazine as she entered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice monotone. Clara forced a smile, holding up the key. "I'm here to access Unit 147, she said, trying to sound confident, despite the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. The attendant nodded, barely glancing at the key before handing her a clipboard to sign. Moments later, she was walking down a long corridor flanked by steel doors, her footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. When she reached Unit 147, Clara paused, her hand hovering over the lock. Her heart thudded loudly in her ears, drowning out the distant hum of traffic outside. She slid the key into the lock and turned it slowly. The mechanism clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a space filled with boxes, files, and various odds and ends. Stepping inside, she began sifting through the contents, her eyes widening with each new discovery. There were stacks of documents bearing unfamiliar names and companies, bank statements listing transactions under aliases she'd never heard of, and journals filled with meticulous notes detailing operations she couldn't begin to comprehend. One journal entry stood out among the rest. Written in Daniel's familiar scrawl, it read, "If anything happens to me, Clara must know the truth about who I really am." Clara froze, the words hitting her like a punch to the gut. Who was Daniel, really? And what truth had he been hiding from her all these years? As she continued reading, fragments of his double life began to emerge. A life filled with danger, deception, and sacrifice. He had been working undercover for a government agency, infiltrating a criminal organization that posed a threat to national security. When the operation ended abruptly, he faked his own death to protect himself and her from retaliation, but not everyone believed he was truly gone, and those hunting him were growing desperate. Clara sank onto a nearby crate, overwhelmed by the revelations. Everything she thought she knew about Daniel had been a lie, or at least only part of the truth. Yet amid the shock and betrayal, she felt a flicker of understanding. Daniel had done what he did to keep her safe, to shield her from harm. Now it was up to her to decide what to do with the knowledge he had left behind. Would she expose the truth, risking her own safety to bring justice to those responsible? Or would she walk away, letting the past remain buried alongside Daniel's secrets? As she sat there staring at the piles of evidence before her, Clara realized that the answer wasn't simple. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about honoring Daniel's memory, ensuring that his sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Whatever choice she made, one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Clara sat amidst the clutter of Unit 147, her mind reeling from the flood of information she had uncovered. The storage unit was like a time capsule, preserving fragments of a life Daniel had kept hidden from her. Each item seemed to tell a story, yet the pieces didn't quite fit together. There were journals filled with cryptic notes, bank statements listing transactions under names she didn't recognize, and even photographs that hinted at a world far removed from the quiet, loving husband she had known. It was as if Daniel had been living two separate lives, one with her and another shrouded in secrecy. As Clara sifted through the contents, One particular journal caught her attention. Its cover was worn, its pages dog-eared and smudged with dirt or ash. She opened it cautiously, flipping through entries written in Daniel's unmistakable handwriting. At first glance, they appeared to be mundane observations, dates, times, locations, and lists of names. But as she read further, the context became clearer and more alarming. The entries detailed covert operations, meetings with shadowy figures, and plans to dismantle what he referred to only as the network. Some passages described high-stakes negotiations, while others recounted moments of fear and uncertainty. In one entry, Daniel wrote, "They're watching. If anyone finds out I'm working for them, we're both dead." The words sent a chill down Clara's spine. Who exactly was them? And who were they, the ones watching him? Her hands trembled as she turned the page, finding yet another chilling note. If anything happens to me, Clara must know the truth about who I really am. This wasn't just a personal diary. It was a message meant specifically for her, a lifeline thrown across time and tragedy. Daniel had anticipated that something might go wrong, that his carefully constructed double life might unravel. He had prepared this trail of clues so that, if he disappeared, she would have the tools to understand why. But understanding wasn't coming easily. As Clara delved deeper into the journals, she began piecing together fragments of Daniel's past. From what she could gather, he had worked undercover for a government agency tasked with infiltrating a powerful criminal organization. The operation had spanned years, during which Daniel assumed multiple identities, moving between cities and countries to avoid detection. His assignments were dangerous, requiring him to gain the trust of ruthless individuals while constantly looking over his shoulder. Yet despite the risks, he had managed to gather critical evidence that ultimately led to the takedown of the organization. However, the victory came at a cost. According to the journals, the operation ended abruptly when higher-ups decided to pull out, leaving loose ends untied. Fearing retaliation, Daniel faked his death, disappearing completely to protect himself and Clara from those who might seek revenge. But not everyone believed he was truly gone. A final entry warned ominously, "They're still out there. They'll never stop looking for me." Clara closed the journal, her chest tight with emotion. For 3 years she had mourned Daniel's passing, believing him to be gone forever. Now she learned that his death had been nothing more than an elaborate ruse, a desperate measure to ensure her safety. While part of her felt betrayed by the deception, another part understood the immense sacrifice he had made. He had chosen to leave her behind, not out of indifference but out of love. Still, the weight of his decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. How could she move forward knowing the truth? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing faintly outside the storage unit. Startled, Clara froze, straining to listen. Was someone else here? Had she been followed? She glanced nervously toward the open door, half expecting to see a figure silhouetted against the dim light of the corridor. After a tense moment, the footsteps faded, and silence returned. Letting out a shaky breath, Clara realized she couldn't stay here much longer. Whoever they were, they might already know she had found the unit. She needed to act quickly. With renewed determination, Clara began organizing the materials she had discovered. She stacked the documents neatly, placing them back into their respective boxes. Among the items, she found a small digital recorder tucked inside a padded envelope. Curious, she pressed play, and Daniel's voice filled the room. The recording was brief, lasting no more than a minute, but it carried a sense of urgency. "Clara," he said, his tone soft yet firm. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer around to explain things myself. What I did to keep you safe. Please don't blame yourself for any of it. If you want answers, contact Agent Harris. He'll help you make sense of everything." Agent Harris. The name rang a bell, though Clara couldn't immediately place it. She rifled through the remaining papers until she found a business card tucked inside one of the envelopes. On it was printed the name Special Agent Robert Harris along with a phone number and an address for a federal office downtown. Clara stared at the card, weighing her options. Reaching out to Agent Harris meant stepping fully into Daniel's secret world, a world she barely understood and wasn't sure she wanted to enter. But staying silent wasn't an option either. If Daniel's warnings were true, then ignoring the danger wouldn't make it go away. After packing up the most important documents and securing the unit, Clara returned home, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She spent the evening poring over the materials once again, trying to absorb every detail. The more she read, the more she realized how deeply entangled Daniel had been in this web of intrigue. Names, dates, and locations began forming a clearer picture, though gaps remained. One thing was certain: whoever they were, they weren't ordinary criminals. They operated in the shadows, pulling strings and wielding power that extended far beyond what Clara had imagined. By morning, Clara had made up her mind. She couldn't face this alone. Picking up the phone, she dialed the number on Agent Harris's card. Her heart raced as the line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Agent Harris speaking." "Hello," Clara said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion swirling inside her. "My name is Clara. I think you knew my husband, Daniel." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Clara," Agent Harris replied, his tone shifting to something softer, almost reverent. "I was wondering when you'd call." For the next hour, Clara listened intently as Agent Harris explained the scope of Daniel's mission and the ongoing threats posed by remnants of the criminal organization. He assured her that protective measures could be put in place, but only if she cooperated fully. Reluctantly, Clara agreed, knowing it was the only way to honor Daniel's legacy and ensure her own safety. As she hung up the phone, a strange mix of relief and dread washed over her. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, Clara felt a glimmer of purpose, a chance to uncover the truth and bring closure to the man she loved. Little did she know the hardest decisions and the greatest dangers still lay ahead. The meeting with Agent Harris took place in a nondescript office building downtown, its exterior as unremarkable as the storage unit Clara had visited days earlier. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the faint hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. Clara sat across from Agent Harris, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to steady their trembling. He was a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His demeanor was calm but professional, exuding an authority that made Clara feel both reassured and uneasy. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Clara," he began, his voice measured and deliberate. "I know this can't be easy for you." Clara nodded, though she wasn't sure how to respond. Her mind was still reeling from everything she had learned about Daniel's double life. She wanted answers, yet part of her feared what those answers might reveal. Still, she forced herself to focus. "Tell me everything," she said finally, her voice firmer than she expected. Who was Daniel really working for, and why did he have to fake his death? Agent Harris leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the desk before him. For a moment he studied her, as if gauging whether she was ready for the truth. Then, with a deep sigh, he began to speak. "Your husband was one of our best operatives," he explained. "He worked under my supervision for nearly a decade, infiltrating criminal networks that posed significant threats to national security. The organization we targeted, it goes by several names but most refer to it simply as the Syndicate, was involved in illegal arms trafficking, money laundering, and even political corruption. They operated globally, with connections reaching into governments and corporations alike." Clara listened intently, her heart pounding. This wasn't just some small-time criminal group. It was a vast, shadowy empire built on fear and greed. How had Daniel managed to survive within such a dangerous world? "The operation your husband led was one of our most ambitious," Agent Harris continued. "Over the course of 3 years, he embedded himself deeply within the syndicate, gaining access to critical intelligence that allowed us to dismantle key operations. But dismantling them came at a cost. We disrupted their activities, but not entirely. Many high-ranking members escaped prosecution, disappearing into the shadows where they regrouped and rebuilt. Clara frowned. So they're still out there? Harris nodded grimly. Yes, and they don't take kindly to betrayal. When the operation ended, we knew Daniel's cover would eventually be blown. If he resurfaced, they'd come after him, and anyone connected to him. Faking his death was the only way to protect him and you. The words hit Clara like a punch to the gut. Protect her? It felt cruel, almost selfish, to lock her away from the truth while Daniel disappeared without a trace. Yet, as much as it hurt, she understood the logic. These people weren't ordinary criminals, they were ruthless, capable of anything. She couldn't help but wonder, had Daniel known all along that faking his death was inevitable? Had he prepared for this moment, leaving behind clues so she could find him, or at least understand why he left? What happens now? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You said they're still out there. Does that mean I'm in danger too? Agent Harris hesitated before answering. We believe so. Your discovery of the storage unit suggests someone may already suspect you've uncovered evidence related to the case. That makes you a target. A cold shiver ran down Clara's spine. Target. The word echoed in her mind, heavy with implications. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, a woman whose biggest worry was paying bills or keeping houseplants alive. Now she found herself thrust into a world of espionage, danger, and intrigue. A world where every step could lead to disaster. Won't let them harm you, Harris assured her, reading the fear in her expression. We'll provide protection and ensure your safety. But I need your full cooperation. You possess information that could help us bring down what remains of the syndicate. Will you work with us? Clara hesitated. On one hand, she wanted justice, not just for Daniel, but for everyone affected by the syndicate's crimes. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the risks. Working with the agency meant stepping fully into Daniel's secret life, exposing herself to dangers she couldn't fully comprehend. Could she handle it? More importantly, did she have a choice? Finally, she nodded. If it means stopping them, if it means honoring Daniel's sacrifice, I'll do whatever it takes. Relief flickered in Agent Harris's eyes. Good. We'll start by securing your home and monitoring your movements. In the meantime, we'll analyze the materials you retrieved from the storage unit. There may be leads buried in those documents that can help us identify key players still active within the syndicate. Over the next few days, Clara's life transformed dramatically. Federal agents installed surveillance cameras around her house and provided her with a secure phone for communication. She was given strict instructions: no social media posts, no unnecessary outings, and absolutely no contact with anyone outside the investigation team. At first, the restrictions felt suffocating, but Clara reminded herself of the stakes. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about finishing what Daniel had started. As promised, Agent Harris and his team began analyzing the contents of the storage unit. Among the documents, they discovered bank records detailing transactions linked to offshore accounts, blueprints of suspected hideouts, and encrypted messages that hinted at upcoming operations. One piece of evidence stood out: a list of aliases used by high-ranking members of the syndicate, complete with photos and descriptions. Clara recognized some of the faces from the photographs Daniel had left behind. Seeing them again sent a chill through her veins, but it also fueled her resolve. Meanwhile, Clara spent hours reviewing Daniel's journals, searching for additional clues. Each entry revealed more about the man he had been, the risks he had taken, the sacrifices he had made, and the constant fear that had haunted him. In one particularly poignant passage, he wrote, "Some days I wonder if I'll ever see Clara again. If she knew the truth, would she hate me? Would she understand? All I can do is hope that someday she'll forgive me." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she read the words. Forgiveness. It was something she hadn't considered until now. Yes, Daniel had deceived her, but he had done so out of love. He had carried the weight of his mission alone, shielding her from harm even as it tore him apart. She realized then that forgiveness wasn't just for Daniel, it was for herself. Holding on to anger and resentment wouldn't bring him back. It would only weigh her down further. With renewed determination, Clara threw herself into the investigation. She attended briefings with Agent Harris, offering insights gleaned from Daniel's journals and recordings. Slowly but surely, the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. They identified locations tied to the syndicate's operations, tracked patterns in their movements, and even uncovered potential informants willing to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Every breakthrough brought them closer to dismantling the organization once and for all. Yet as progress mounted, so did the tension. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the syndicate somehow knew they were closing in. Late at night, she often found herself staring out the window, scanning the dark streets for signs of movement. Shadows seemed darker, sounds louder, and every creak of the floorboard sent her heart racing. She told herself it was paranoia, a natural reaction to the circumstances. But deep down, she knew better. Danger was real, lurking just beyond the edges of her carefully guarded life. One evening, as she prepared for bed, her secure phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Agent Harris. "Meet me at HQ tomorrow morning. Urgent update." The text was brief, cryptic even, but the urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Clara's stomach tightened. Something big was happening, something that could change everything. As she lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with possibilities, each scenario more terrifying than the last. What if they had found Daniel? What if the syndicate had struck back? Or worse, what if she was walking straight into a trap? Despite her fears, one thought kept her grounded. Daniel had fought for justice, for a safer world. Now, it was her turn to carry the torch. Whatever awaited her tomorrow, she vowed to face it head-on, for Daniel, for herself, and for everyone counting on her to make things right. Little did she know, the events of the following day would test her courage and her faith in ways she never imagined. The next morning, Clara arrived at the federal office building earlier than instructed. The streets were quiet, the city still waking up, but her mind was anything but calm. Every step she took felt heavier than usual, as though the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. She had dressed simply, a plain blouse and jeans, but her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bag. Inside it was the digital recorder Daniel had left behind, along with a few key documents Agent Harris had requested. She wasn't sure why they needed them now, but she trusted that they were pieces of a larger puzzle. When she entered the conference room where Agent Harris awaited her, the atmosphere was tense. Harris stood near a large screen displaying maps, photographs, and highlighted notes. Two other agents sat at the table, their faces serious. Clara recognized one of them from previous meetings, but the other was unfamiliar. Likely someone higher ranking, judging by the way everyone deferred to him. As she took her seat, Harris nodded briefly in greeting before diving straight into the matter at hand. "We've made significant progress," he began, his tone brisk yet measured. "Thanks to the materials you provided, we've identified several high-value targets within the syndicate. More importantly, we've uncovered evidence of an imminent operation, one that could have devastating consequences if allowed to proceed." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of operation?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harris hesitated for a moment, then gestured toward the screen. A map appeared, dotted with red markers indicating locations across the country. "Based on intercepted communications and financial records, we believe the syndicate is planning a coordinated attack on critical infrastructure, power grids, water supplies, transportation hubs. Their goal is chaos, designed to destabilize the region and create opportunities for exploitation." The words hung in the air like storm clouds, heavy and ominous. Clara stared at the map, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what she was hearing. These weren't just criminals, they were terrorists capable of wreaking havoc on an unimaginable scale. And somehow Daniel had been part of stopping them, or trying to. "But there's more," Harris continued, his expression grim. "We also discovered that some of these targets are linked to individuals who knew your husband personally. It's possible they suspect you're involved in our investigation. That makes you not only a witness but a potential liability. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Liability. The word sent a chill through her body. She had known the risks when she agreed to cooperate, but this was worse than she had imagined. These people weren't just dangerous, they were methodical, calculating every move with precision. If they suspected her involvement, she wouldn't be safe anywhere. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. "How? Do we stop them?" Harris exchanged a glance with the senior agent before answering. "We need to act fast. Our plan is twofold. First, we'll deploy teams to neutralize the immediate threats, disrupt their operations, and arrest key players. Second, we'll use you as bait." Clara blinked, certain she had misheard. "Bait? What do you mean?" "It's risky, I know," Harris admitted, leaning forward slightly. "But hear me out. We've identified a location where members of the syndicate are scheduled to meet later today. Based on intelligence gathered from the storage unit and Daniel's journals, we believe this meeting will involve negotiations tied to the planned attacks. By placing you strategically nearby, under heavy surveillance, we can draw them out, confirm identities, and gather further evidence." Clara's stomach churned. The idea of putting herself directly in harm's way terrified her, but she understood the logic. Without concrete proof, taking down the syndicate would be nearly impossible. Still, the thought of facing those cold, calculating eyes, the same ones Daniel had once looked into, made her feel sick. "I won't force you to agree," Harris added quickly, sensing her hesitation. "This is entirely your decision, but I want you to understand the stakes. If we don't stop them now, countless lives could be lost, including yours." For a long moment, Clara said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the window, where sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds. Outside, the world seemed so normal, unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface. She thought about Daniel, about the sacrifices he had made to protect her, and others. Could she do any less? Finally, she turned back to Harris and nodded. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "But I need to know exactly what's expected of me." Relief flickered across Harris's face, though his expression remained grave. "You'll accompany us to the location, a cafe near the meeting site. You'll sit inside, visible through the windows while we monitor everything remotely. If anyone approaches or shows signs of recognizing you, we'll intervene immediately. Your safety is our top priority." Over the next hour, the team went over the details meticulously. They showed Clara photos of the individuals they believed would attend the meeting, drilled her on emergency protocols, and ensured she understood the importance of staying calm under pressure. Despite their assurances, fear gnawed at her insides. What if something went wrong? What if the syndicate saw through the ruse and targeted her anyway? By mid-afternoon, Clara found herself sitting at a corner table in the bustling cafe, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in front of her. Her pulse raced as she scanned the crowded room, searching for familiar faces among the strangers. Outside, pedestrians hurried past, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Across the street, the meeting site, an abandoned warehouse, loomed silently, its windows dark and foreboding. To distract herself, Clara opened the digital recorder Daniel had left behind. She pressed play, letting his voice fill her ears once, again. "Clara," he said softly, "if you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer around to explain things myself. What I did to keep you safe. Please don't blame yourself for any of it. If you want answers, contact Agent Harris. He'll help you make sense of everything." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. This was her chance to honor Daniel's memory, to ensure his sacrifices hadn't been in vain. She owed it to him and to herself to see this through. Suddenly, a commotion outside drew her attention. Through the cafe window, she saw a group of men entering the warehouse. Their movements were deliberate, almost rehearsed, and they glanced around cautiously as though expecting trouble. One of them caught her eye, a tall figure with sharp features and piercing eyes. Clara's blood ran cold. She recognized him instantly from the photographs Daniel had left behind. He was one of the syndicate's leaders, a man responsible for countless atrocities. Her hand instinctively reached for the hidden microphone clipped to her collar. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "I see them." Within seconds, the room erupted into controlled chaos. Agents stationed nearby sprang into action, surrounding the warehouse and cutting off escape routes. Clara watched as the men inside realized they were trapped, their expressions shifting from confidence to panic. Gunfire echoed in the distance, followed by shouts and the sound of screeching tires. It was over almost as quickly as it began. When the dust settled, Agent Harris entered the cafe, his face flushed with adrenaline. "It's done," he said, placing a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "We got them, thanks to you." Clara exhaled shakily, relief washing over her like a wave. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The syndicate's leadership had been dismantled, their plans thwarted. Though the battle wasn't entirely won, it was a victory nonetheless, a testament to Daniel's bravery and her own determination. As she stepped outside into the fading light of evening, Clara allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead would still be difficult, filled with healing and rebuilding. But for now, she could breathe easier, knowing that justice had finally begun to prevail. The days following the raid on the warehouse were a blur of activity for Clara. Federal agents worked tirelessly to process the evidence collected during the operation, while news outlets buzzed with reports of arrests tied to a major criminal organization. The public didn't know the full story, how close they had come to disaster or the role one woman played in stopping it, but Clara didn't care about recognition. For her, the outcome was enough. Lives had been saved, justice served, and Daniel's legacy honored. Yet despite the relief that washed over her, Clara couldn't shake the lingering weight of everything she'd uncovered. The truth about Daniel's life and death was both heartbreaking and humbling. He had sacrificed so much not just for her but for countless others who would never know his name. Now, as the dust settled, Clara found herself grappling with questions she hadn't anticipated. What did she do next? How did she move forward after learning that the man she loved had lived a double life? Agent Harris had assured her that the immediate threat was neutralized, but he warned her to remain vigilant. "People like this don't disappear overnight," he said during their final debriefing. "Even with their leaders gone, remnants of the syndicate may still exist. Stay safe, and let us know if anything unusual happens." Clara nodded, though part of her wondered if she'd ever truly feel safe again. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed, a fragile bubble waiting to burst. She installed additional locks on her doors and kept her phone charged at all times, ready to call for help if needed. But more than physical safety, it was the emotional toll that weighed heavily on her. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock at the door, sent her heart racing. Nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded her as memories of Daniel flooded her mind, each one bittersweet. To cope, Clara began visiting Daniel's grave less frequently. It wasn't because she wanted to forget him, it was quite the opposite. She realized that holding on to his memory meant finding new ways to honor him. One afternoon, while tidying up her living room, she stumbled upon an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. Flipping through its pages brought tears to her eyes, but also smiles. There was Daniel laughing at a picnic, his arms wrapped around her waist. There he was teaching her how to ride a bicycle, his patience unwavering despite her wobbly attempts. And there he was, standing proudly beside her at their wedding, looking every bit the devoted husband she remembered. Inspired by these moments, Clara decided to create something tangible, a tribute to Daniel's courage and sacrifice. She spent weeks compiling photographs, journal entries, and recordings into a scrapbook dedicated to his memory. Each page told a piece of his story, from the loving husband she knew to the brave operative who risked everything to protect others. When it was finished, she placed it on her bookshelf, where it sat alongside other cherished mementos. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was a start, a way to keep Daniel alive in her heart without letting grief consume her. As time passed, Clara slowly began rebuilding her life. She reconnected with friends she hadn't seen in years, joined a local gardening club, and even started volunteering at a community center. Helping others gave her purpose, reminding her that life, no matter how fragile, was worth celebrating. Still, she carried Daniel's lessons with her everywhere she went. His bravery taught her resilience, his secrecy reminded her of the importance of trust, and his love inspired her to live fully, even in the face of uncertainty. One evening, as she watered the plants on her balcony, Clara noticed a letter slipped under her front door. Her pulse quickened as she picked it up, her mind flashing back to the paranoia of recent weeks. But when she opened it, she found not a threat, but a note from Agent Harris. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for your courage. You've made a difference." Beneath the words was a photograph of Daniel, taken during his time undercover. In the image, he stood confidently beside a group of agents, his expression resolute yet kind. It was a side of him Clara hadn't known before, but seeing it filled her with pride. That night, Clara sat by her window, staring out at the stars. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of acceptance. Daniel was gone, yes, but his spirit lived on in the choices she made, the people she helped, and the strength she found within herself. Life would never be the same, but perhaps that was okay. After all, growth often came from loss and beauty from brokenness. In the weeks and months that followed, Clara continued to share Daniel's story. She spoke at community events about the dangers of organized crime and the importance of supporting law enforcement efforts. She donated the scrapbook to a museum exhibit honoring unsung heroes, ensuring that future generations would remember Daniel's contributions. Though speaking publicly about such personal matters wasn't easy, Clara found solace in knowing that her words might inspire others to act with courage and compassion. On what would have been Daniel's birthday, Clara returned to the cemetery one last time. The air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Kneeling beside his grave, she placed a single white rose atop the marble headstone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Thank you for protecting me, for doing what you believed was right. I miss you more than words can say, but I promise to keep going. For you, for us." As she stood to leave, Clara glanced down at the ground near the base of the grave. The hole she had discovered weeks earlier was now filled in, the earth smooth and undisturbed. But instead of feeling sadness, she felt hope. The secrets buried beneath the surface had been unearthed, their truths brought into the light. And though the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path forward. Walking away from the cemetery, Clara took a deep breath, savoring the cool evening breeze against her skin. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. Daniel's love and his sacrifices would guide her every step of the way.